Hello and welcome. Here at Windsor Public Library, we are highlighting and celebrating local poets for the month of April, which is Poetry Month. Joining me today is Windsor-born poet, editor, and academic, Dr. Micheline Maylor. She is the author of numerous publications. Her most recent poetry collection, The Bad Wife, won the 2022 Robert Crouch Award for Poetry. Dr. Maylor holds a PhD from the University of Newcastle upon Tyne. She was a professor of creative writing and literature at Mount Royal University, where she won the 2015 Teaching Excellence Award. Dr. Maylor is also a poetry editor and a reviewer. She's the co-founder of the Free Fall Literary Society. From 2016 to 2018, she served as Calgary's first female Poet Laureate. And recently in 2022, she was awarded the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal for her literary contributions to Alberta. Thank you so much, Micheline, for being with us today. I'm wondering if you could start off by reading one of your poems.
Sure. This is the opening poem from The Bad Wife, and it's titled How to Become a Bad Wife. Start with the archetype of innocence. Start as the lawful good. Let the kraken dice fall in good favor. Start with a long white sundress, strappy sandals, and bring a puppy. Flirt. Look wide-eyed at the world with brown, swirling fingers, point at dreams and purple mountain bluebells. Use brown sugar in your coffee, sweeten everything. Once you're sure you're being followed by the man, let the tan of your ankle show, hide the barnyards of your life in the hem of your skirt, daub the light pink eyeshadow from Shoppers Drug Mart in the corner of your lids. Appear fresh. You must look good to really make the effects last before you turn dark. Turn dark after the vows. Wait until after the firstborn and then the secondborn. Secure your sweetness in their DNA. Then experience the rock slide of your own heart. Skiff across doubt's surface. Slide slowly. Gather dirt and wounds. Stay calm and frightening. A temple guardian of the heart. Envision lizards running on water, panic at your own life. Find yourself someone to talk to. A nice professor much older than you, always safe. Go somewhere for coffee. Be sure the children are with the babysitter. Start sinking, not skimming. Become an unreliable narrator. Find danger as water invades your ears, sunlight loyal above you. See the patterns on the surface ripple and shake. Here is the diaphanous. Find yourself drowned. Utter your own epitaph from underneath the seas. Here lies the bad wife.
That was great. Thank you. So I just want to start off by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about The Bad Wife?
Yeah, The Bad Wife, like so many things is, Wordsworth talks about poetry being emotion reflected in tranquility. And so The Bad Wife was a fictional and non-fictional account of a marriage falling apart. And I have to say that there are fictional elements in it, of course, but it's kind of this hybrid of things. And when relationships fall apart, we often feel like we're in surreal and unexpected places. And I just thought this could be instructive. This could be instructive, especially because it seemed to me that there were a lot of women who are really struggling with what it's like to be a good wife versus a bad wife, or a good girlfriend, or a good woman. These kinds of themes tend to emerge more than you would expect in the 21st century. So it was kind of a reflection on that, and just this intimate look into the depths of my own mind and process, which was fictional, non-fictional, and a little bit surreal.
I really loved the second half of the book. You have this very long poem. Could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that poem and maybe a little bit about the form and how it differs from some of the other pieces in the book?
Sure. Omen, Calla, Lilies is a long poem. When you think about what poetry is, Wordsworth says it's emotion reflected in tranquility. Some other poets might say that it's something to the effect of it's an embodiment of voice. And so for me, Omen, Calla, Lilies, which ended up being something like 36 pages or something like that, was that embodiment of voice. Sometimes a poem is the conversation that we're having with the person who's not there, right? Whether that person be not there for reasons of they've passed away, or maybe you're talking to someone who you've never even known. Like another friend of mine has a series of poems written to Frida Kahlo. And of course, she's never met Frida Kahlo, right? She couldn't have. They didn't even exist in the same time frame. But sometimes poetry can be an embodiment of voice that's speaking to a person, a ghost, a thing that's no longer available for some reason. So Omen, Calla, Lilies is that embodiment of the voice. These are the things that were said, this imaginary conversation that went on afterwards, after that person is no longer available to speak to. So in that way, that's how that developed. And a long poem can develop out of such conversations because there are certain people we're never quite done talking to.
And now I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your writing process. So where does a poem start for you, and how do you get it from that initial idea to the finished work?
Yeah, okay. So for me, a poem almost always begins by rating the environment. So for example, um, I love to walk because I think that that's one of the best ways to find inspiration. It's because sometimes you see something and it creates this moment of stop, where you stop and then you're like, what did I just see? Or sometimes it's like, if you're walking by people, have you ever heard somebody eavesdrop, you're eavesdropping, or you walk by
Yeah.
something, you catch this figment of conversation and you're like, that's a thing. So it's this, what you do is you raid what I do, I shouldn't say you, because I don't know what you do, but what I do is I raid my environment. So I'm constantly looking for like these little flashes of like moments where something grasps my attention, and that can come through sight or sound or even feel. Like sometimes you can be out and let's say you're walking in the rain and how that feels. So it's really about rating the environment and looking for opportunities. That's the best way to find your way into poetry, for sure, and that goes from beginners to experts. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. You're actively looking for that inspiration, right? Rather than sort of waiting for something to
Yeah,
come to you, right? Like you're searching for that.
absolutely. You go searching for it. Exactly. You're like looking for opportunities rather than waiting for something to come to you. And I have to say that one of the things that you have on your side in Windsor is that river walk. I don't know any time that I've ever done that river walk where something astounding hasn't been going on, all the way from people with their minnows and buckets to like what they're like. One time I went for a walk and some guy was hauling roller skates out of the river, and I'm like, how long have those been there? Like, it was crazy, right? So you and Windsor have this phenomenal walking path that's just ripe with opportunities.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like it's beautiful to walk by there, but you're right. It's like a hub of activity. Like there's always a lot of people down there, a lot of things going on for sure.
A
Yeah,
lot of cultures, a lot of really human moments. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So, kind of on that note, so you were born in Windsor, but you moved. Like, do you have a connection to Windsor still? Like, what is that story there?
You bet. You bet. I still do have a connection to Windsor. So I was born in Windsor. I moved to Alberta in 1975. But I have been back to Windsor every year.
Okay.
I I grew up on I grew up on Goyu and Riverside,
Okay.
right there. That's where I grew up. Like, and everybody's like, nobody grows up there. Well, I grew up there.
Yeah.
So, and my grandmother still lives there, and I come and visit her twice a year without fail, and go for big walks and keep in touch with Marty Gervais and Peter Hristovic, the new
Okay.
Windsor Poet Laureate. And I've been invited to read at Willestead Manor a couple of times. And yes, that's definitely the place my family is from. And I feel very, very much connected to Windsor.
So
Yes.
you were the Poet Laureate of Calgary starting in 2016. Can
Yes.
you talk a little bit about that experience and what that was like?
Christine, that experience was a whirlwind. Let me tell you, it was a whirlwind. I think in the 2 years, I think I did something like 200 different events or meetings. It was crazy. It was a
Wow.
lot.
Okay.
And I learned so much about the city itself, communities. Like I worked with little kids that were just learning how to read. And then I worked with this group of 90-year-old ladies who are really interested in the history of well, basically everything. And I worked with brand new immigrants who brought poetry from their home countries and were in love with the word and the ways in which poetry sounds and connects with us as in terms of being human beings and in terms of being emotional touchstones within our lives, because that's what a poem can do. It can become an emotional touchstone in your life. I I worked with women, I worked with men, I worked with just everybody you can possibly think of. And what I learned mostly is that poetry is massive. It's this massive thing that has enough room for everybody. Like the little kid who loves one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, he's already being hooked into poetry. And then the 94-year-old lady who can recite Dylan Thomas, she's, it stays with you. Like there's just this massive space for poetry, and there's just this wonderful love for it that doesn't seem to happen with any other art. Like, you could read essays or you could read fiction, but nothing has that depth of meaning quite like a poem.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And you were also, I understand, the author in residence at the Calgary Public Library. So what was
I
that
was.
role like there?
I was during that exact same time. So a lot of
Okay.
times people would come to me as both the author in residence and the poet laureate. And oftentimes they would bring segments of their own writing, whether that was poetry or whether it was a memoir or whether it was fiction. And they would bring pieces of their own writing to me to ask for either feedback or maybe some advice on what to do with it or where to take it. Or sometimes they just wanted to share it and have their story heard by someone. And so there were all kinds of varied sorts of experiences within that role. But again, what it taught me was that literature, and especially poetry, seems to just affect people in a way that really matters to them. And so it was a really enriching experience talking to all of those different voices. And, I couldn't be more blessed. I don't know how anything else could have replicated that experience. I just got to meet such wonderful people and such a variety of people that it really opened my eyes up to how big it is. But I think I've said that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so people would seek out your feedback or your advice on their writing. And of course, you've taught creative writing. When you've done those kinds of things, like what makes a poem, I guess, stand out to you?
Okay, this is a really complicated question, and I'll try to answer it as simply as possible. So I think that there's two major elements. One is structure. Oh, I have ink all over my hand. And the other one is content, right? Structure and content. So when a poem marries structure and content effectively, that's when you get a really great poem. So structure can be the how you tell the story, or the way that you tell the story that makes a connection between content and structure. So let me give you an example. Like in Japanese poetry, for example, there's a form called a haibun, and it is specific to creating a journey. So, one poet that I know that's from Calgary who also moved to Windsor, Skylar Kay, took her journey and created this Japanese form in order, she used the Japanese form in order to tell her story. So that helped, because the content of her work, which is about her, well, I'm just going to say her journey. I don't need to speak for her, but she married that with the right thing, and it just enlivened, because the content and the form have connections. So when you're a poet, you want to think like there's ideas, and you have ideas, of course, but then when you marry the idea with the right form, that's often when it can elevate itself. And the right form, when I say that, I don't just mean like formal structures of poetry, because the right form can also be just the language alone. So let me give you another example. Let's talk about Dr. Seuss again for a second. So here you have someone who is writing in iambic pentameter and who is creating content, and he's doing it like, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am. So he's got the rhyme, he's got the rhythm, and he's got the language. And those are ways that form can matter. So rhythm, language, structure, and content, which is ideas. All four of those things, when they come together in the right way, make a poem stand out.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Do you have any favorite poets yourself? Who inspires you in your work?
Absolutely. When we talk about dead poets, I can talk about Philip Larkin. He'll live with me till I die. Philip Larkin, I can revisit and revisit and revisit and feel pretty good about it. Same with W.H. Auden, but those are classic old guys. In terms of new voices, I have to point at Billy Ray Belcourt. I mean, he's doing fairly amazing things, and the ways in which he uses metaphor in his work are spectacular. Just clean, crisp, and also just like transport you into different worlds. So I'm gonna recommend Billy Ray Belcourt. And that other poet that I recommended, the one that had moved from Calgary to Windsor, her name is Skylar Kay, and her book is fantastic as well for the ways that it uses form to discuss her content. Baz McCavanagh, there's a new poet. She wrote a book called Niche that was about endangered species and the red list. And the red list is the list of species that are endangered. And her book was fantastic as well. It really was eye-opening, and it was both a love story and a danger call at the same time. So I really admire that book also. I mean, I probably have like a list of 100, but I better stop.
Yeah, I know it's probably hard to narrow it down with that. Then my last question for you is, do you have any advice for aspiring poets?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do. First thing is just read as much as possible. Read as much poetry as you can get your hands on. Fortunately, we have all of these wonderful resources like the public libraries that have oodles and oodles of poetry, for one thing. So go there. The other thing that a reader might not know is that when you take out books, those people can use access copyright, and they actually get paid for you taking out their books. So please use that service. It's really wonderful. Another really wonderful thing online is the poetryfoundation.com. That's a free resource in the United States, but it's this massive library of poetry essays. I believe that it was a charitable donation that had happened in the late 1990s that established this website and kind of online library. So there's a ton of stuff that's available for free, and read as much as possible because it inspires ideas, and you can look at things and you can say, oh, look at how they did that thing, or oh, I really like the sound of this thing, or oh, this image over here is really standing out to me and I would like to build on that. So what it can do is it can generate ideas by itself. So that's a number one. And a number two, because I don't want to say which one to do more, but reading matters, but writing matters too. Like if you want to be a poet, then you have to write. And that means, plug into it every day. And, everything you write isn't going to be brilliant, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. It's just keep going. Just keep going. If you really want to do it, then read a lot and write a lot, because eventually that spark will come to the page and you'll surprise yourself, and it'll be a wonderful day.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, that's all. Those are all the questions that I have for you today. I really appreciate you taking this time to sit down with me, discuss and share with everyone who will be watching this interview. Would you mind reading another poem to close off today's session?
Sure. I'll read you another poem from The Bad Wife, and this one's called Inclement Weather. Have you seen the sky turn on a rocky cliff face? Cobalt silk morph into dappled gray hide. Seen the sky muddle beyond metaphor. Remember, I loved you spectacularly. From the time I spied you mowing the lawn in your underwear to another time your body slipped in the air, turned and sprung off the edge of our vacation boat. Backflips for the children, circus tricks, turns of impatience and longing, while hours sat across, peaceful in inhabited rooms. CBC on the speakers droning the news almost the same as yesterday, so samey is the turning of the world, so full of human nature churning. Those days smutched to years spread soft and grass green. Let's not forget none of it was a waste. Let's not forget the mercury moodiness of weather over the slim sliced schist jammed along into the continent. Our marriage was here for the millennia of our lives. It too has a drift, a motion told in geologic time, a fault line. I have felt the color of your mood in my breast. The way you despise me now tramples down the highway, punches hooves into my chest. But I have not forgotten your beauty, or the lilies you found at Safeway late on Mother's Day, the sun-bleached Celtic glacial tint of your eyes. The talks we hushed in the bathroom, private and loving, while our children slept in night-dimmed rooms hallways away, safe then from me, from us. There is much to mourn and maybe even more to say, but now silence needs a length of time, the forge of memory. I have not forgotten the way the clouds here scud off mountaintops and shift a whole sky, the same way tides scramble oceans. You will never be wrong in our children's DNA. We will have all of time to sit in those cells patiently together, all of the stories of our past still in synchronicity. Let those remembrances be balm enough for what has become of our bombed out home, empty of my things and all the rhythms we kept. Tell your son you loved me, keep once inside. All the sky is still in motion. Did you see the weather shift? Even now, thunderheads might break into blue.